Good morning, wanderers. How are you doing in the apocalypse? Just drive me up the flipping wall. Leave a comment below. How are you doing? Anyway, today we're going to go a little walk around Stowmarket, obviously, because we can't go far, and have a look at a few things, a bit of history, and maybe some you do know, some you didn't know, some you did know but forgot. Let's go walk anyway. Come with me.
Come along, yeah, you know you can. Walking on, he's the walking man.
In today's video, I'm doing a circular walk around Stowmarket and exploring various bits of local history. Okay, Scotty, engage walk drive. Let's go. We come to Stowmarket Old Cemetery, and behind me you can see the memorial to the 1871 gun cotton explosion. I'm not going to go right into the gun cotton explosion because I explained that in the Gipping Valley Walk video. I'll put a little card above and a link in the description below if you want to see that video, Gipping Valley Walk, and I explain and in fact reenact the whole gun cotton explosion of Stowmarket. So one of the questions I want to answer in this video is, why did the cemetery get moved here? Because originally, obviously, it was around the church, in the churchyard. So why was it moved out of town? We're going to try and answer that question and a few others. But first I'm going to go back out of the cemetery and back onto Violet Hill Road and have a look at another piece of history that you don't really notice because the interesting bit's mostly gone. So apparently the name Cherry Tree Road comes from the fact that the Cherry Tree Road was built on the cherry orchard of the old Chilton Hall farm. But also around this area back in the day were, I think, a couple of windmills which you can see on the old maps. So this is the 1839 tithe map of Stowmarket. You can see the town centre down the bottom here. Over here on the left of the picture, marked as Slough Lane, this is actually Recreation Road. This is a recreation ground. This is what's now Violet Hill Road, but it was known as Slough Road at the time. Violet Hill, you will see incidentally, is where Fairfield Hill is now. So this is where Violet Hill Road meets it with Bury Road, Bury Street, Bury Road, and you can see it says Windmills. There's one there at the bottom of the road and one there. So this is roughly where Cherry Tree Road is now, and I think this is actually a photograph of that windmill. This field marked 166 here has another windmill in the corner right there. We go to a similar place on the 1888 map. You'll see that Recreation Road is still called Slough Lane there, but what we now know as Violet Hill Road is called Cemetery Lane. So you'll see that we've still got windmills disused here. You've got what's now the old cemetery here. The third windmill is gone and the current cemetery is still marked there. It's a shame in one sense that the windmills weren't kept and renovated as part of the heritage, but I guess it became broken down and obsolete back in the day. Okay, so our next stop has quite a lot of interesting points. This house was once the Bell Inn, which I've explained in my video, The Lost Pubs of Stowmarket, And here's a little clip from that video. The Bell Inn, which stands at 18 Bury Road on the corner of what was Sick House Lane, now Pound Lane. It was open 1836 and closed in 1919. A newspaper from 1880 stated that a man from London visited the landlord of the Bell Inn and sold him a donkey. The animal is said to be capable of 1 mile in 3.5 minutes, and it caused quite a sensation at the railway station when it was elevated into a horse box. So this lane is Pound Lane. It was also known as Bell Lane because it used to be next to the Bell Inn. So why is it called Pound Lane? Well, when the farmers came to the livestock market, there used to be a pound here, or a field where they could pen their sheep and cows and livestock for the night, so they could go into town, do a bit of socialising, make some deals. And so it became known as Pound Lane because it was adjacent to the animal pound. Going further back though, it was called Sick House Lane, as you can see on this old map. So why Sick House Lane? Well, at one time the people built a sick house slightly out of town for things like scarlet fever and that kind of thing, infectious diseases, and this is where they built it, and there was just this lane and it just came to the sick house. It was kind of stood on its own, I guess. This cottage in Pound Lane was once the sick house, the town's first isolation hospital for infectious diseases. It was built in 1675. The cottage was in use as a sick house or pest house from 1700 till 1783, and according to Hollingsworth, not only for the care of the poor, but also for some soldiers quartered in the town and suffering from smallpox. There used to be a separate house for the matron of the sick house to the left of the cottage, but a modern property now occupies that site. The sick house or pest house is now called Chelsea Cottage. So we come to the fish and chip shop, and you wouldn't think that was historical. It actually is, because there were no fish and chip shops in England, and then suddenly there were thousands, and we're going to see why in a minute. Just round the corner is the key to that question of why there were no fish and chip shops anywhere in Britain. You maybe got one on a coastal, on a fishing port, but there was no fish and chip shops in Britain, because obviously back in the day, if you put a crate of fish on a horse and cart and walk it, 100 miles, all the fish is going to be rotten by the time you get to where you're going. Same as if you put it on a horse-drawn barge up the canal. So you couldn't have fish and chips because you couldn't get the fish there fresh, until something happened in this town that transformed it in terms of fish and chip shops. So what was the transformation that enabled chip shops to spring up all over Britain? It was, of course, the railway. Here we are at Stowmarket railway station. And I'll just show you the tithe map of Stowmarket, which is before the railway came, and you can see that the buildings are very limited to around this central area of town. Now if we compare that to a later map after the railway arrived, you can see the rapid spread of businesses and properties and homes and things in the town, and it was all due to the railway. This is a rather grand railway station for a small town like Stowmarket, and there is a history to that, but we'll do that another time. But yeah, it was the railway that made fish and chip shops and a lot of other things possible. Before the railway, really, if you went in a restaurant, the food was all local, because you just couldn't ship perishable goods very far. The horse-drawn canal boats were too slow, the horses and carts were too slow. But the speed of the railways just revolutionised everything, the Industrial Revolution, and got goods and services all over Britain. There are now more than 8,000 fish and chip shops in Britain, and I think there's 8 chip shops to every McDonald's. That's how many chip shops there are. And so we come to Stowmarket Parish Churchyard, and this was where everyone was buried back in the day. This was the main cemetery this was the cemetery in the town. So why was it moved up the road to what's now the old cemetery back in 1800 and something? I'll show you. What I'm going to do is walk down into the marketplace, and we are actually walking down. I know Suffolk doesn't have hills, but it does have inclines. And so imagine you've got all these hundreds and hundreds of people buried in this churchyard, and then as we go down the slope of the butter market into town, we discover why the cemetery was moved. Going back to the mid-1800s, lots of people were still getting their water from the pump in the marketplace, and obviously if you bury a load of bodies just up a slight slope, especially if they've had smallpox or TB or some other horrendous disease, obviously some of that bad stuff then filters into the groundwater, which is where the pump was getting the water from, so people got sick. So in 1855, in the new cemetery that's now the old cemetery, there was the first burial. And in 1902, the pump was removed from the marketplace. YouTube thinks you'll like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification. You get notifications of new videos.
Walking on, he's the walking man.